Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar called Demystifying Business Analysis, a panel discussion with some of IIBA's top business analysis professionals. I am your moderator, Mariah Weiss, and I work as part of the marketing team here at IIBA. IIBA is an independent, not-for-profit professional association serving the global business analysis community. A recognized thought leader dedicated to elevating the discipline of business analysis, we provide our global community with relevant tools, resources, and networking opportunities. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions tab in your control panel. We will answer some of your questions at the end of the session as time permits. You can find today's deck in the handouts tab. And you can find today's webinar recording in our IIBA webinar archives page within 10 business days. I am here with your panelists, Jared Gorai, IIBA's Director of Chapter and Membership Engagement, with experience in retail and energy sectors, Danelka Sarah, IIBA's Chapter Operations Manager, with experience in fintech, hospitality, and the tourism sector, and Scott Bennett, IIBA's Manager of Business Analysis with experience in the financial services sector. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Today, we are talking to our 3 business analysis professionals to see what it means to be a BA across different industries. We will be asking you to participate in some polls so we know what this webinar means for you. So I'm going to open the first question to Jared. What does business analysis mean to you?
So thanks, Mariah. If you get fundamental to it, it's all about understanding needs, recommending solutions, and providing value. A lot of people will try to explain that they aren't business analysts, but I really think we all do business analysis. When you're going to the grocery store, buying a new car, they're both examples of business analysis. What is the need, and what do I recommend as a solution? And needs happen at different levels. There's project business analysis that a lot of people know and understand, but business analysis also happens at the operational and at the strategic levels. At each of these levels, we do business analysis by determining those needs and providing value through recommending solutions. And I think sometimes practitioners forget that the recommendations are part of the analysis, and it's not simply enough to hand over the analysis to someone else to decide, right? I think we connect the dots. We have the best insight into what makes the most sense for the organization. So let's go to that poll.
Very interesting. I see a lot of them consider themselves business analysis professionals here. So I'm going to direct my next question to Scott. Scott Bennett, what would you recommend to someone just getting started in business analysis?
Scott, you're on mute.
Thank you. I started my career working on a large project, and I was partnered up with a senior business analyst. And it was a really rich learning environment as a new BA. And I've managed several business analyst teams since, and that's what I look to do is partner a new BA with someone who's experienced, because there's only so much you can learn from reading material or watching webinars. Seeing someone in practice and how they handle various questions, the various techniques they use, can be very powerful. So that would be my suggestion.
That's a really good suggestion. Thank you so much, Scott. So I'm going to direct my next question at Danelka. What are the top skills needed to be a successful business analysis professional?
All right, that's a loaded question. I could answer it with 2 words. However, those 2 words have a really complex response, and that's effective listening. Actually, effective communication. Sorry about that. So if you really think about effective communication, you need to understand who your audience is. You need to understand who your stakeholders are. So it's not just the being able to talk back and forth with them, but being able to ask those, have that curiosity to ask all the right questions, and to really drill down to what value they're seeking. Now get this though, if you ask all the right questions, I mean, we have that whole 5 whys technique that, you know, why and why and why to get down to the root cause and to the value of it. But you know what's key within all that? Listen to this. You have to listen. You have to stop and actually get their response. Pay attention to what they're actually saying, and just, you want to listen to understand what that value is. You don't listen to respond, but really to just grasp what direction you want to go in. And again, value is everything that should drive us. That should be our one motivator. So it's having that curiosity and being able to stop and look at it from their perspective. If we're going to turn around and we're going to deliver better outcomes for our stakeholders, what is it that our stakeholders value? So being able to step aside from who you are and what your beliefs are and putting yourself in the shoes of that person. And to me, that's just like going back to effective communication. It's not about talking, it's about the whole entire big picture, and seeking value.
That's a really good point, Anelka. Thank you. I'll direct my next question to Jared. What are some important hard skills of business analysis professionals in your experience?
So for anyone that knows me, you know that the mantra, my take on the mantra of a BA is that depends. It depends on what you're doing and where you are in the organization. So growing up in the retail sector, planning was always near and dear to me, right? It was so important because I found out firsthand that when I didn't plan, or I didn't plan to the extent that I needed to, I was being told what to do and when to have things completed. So I learned quickly to plan my approaches, plan my timeframes, plan what was going on, plan when I was going to interact with different stakeholders and whatnot. And that planning was so important. But as I progressed, the planning became less deliberate, less documented, perhaps, and perhaps more agile, right? So I started out in the reporting group of a retail company, and so data analytics would be one of the other hard skills that I would highly recommend, because it's always been important, right? So understanding the data and using that data to tell stories for understanding, as well as to help connect the dots I talked about earlier. It's been a huge help in my career. When my last role before joining IIBA was in health and safety, and I think that the data analysis that I did helped save lives, and that's pretty important. When I moved on to become a strategic business analyst, we turned capability mapping, which is another hard skill, into data points and analyze where to invest, doing business cases and whatnot. So hard skills, there's lots of them. It really depends on what industry you're in what capacity you're doing business analysis. But those would be the three that I would take away: the planning, the data analytics, and then capability mapping.
Thank you, Jared. Those are all really good points to bring up. Next, I'm going to switch to a slide that highlights a statistic from the 2019 IIBA salary survey. This shows us top business analysis industries. So on that note, I would like to open up the discussion to each of our panelists on their experiences within their industry. I'll direct the question to Scott first. So what does business analysis look like in the financial sector?
In financial services, I've been working in the industry for about 20 years, held a number of different roles, but there's some key themes. The first one, an obvious one, is customer service. Every financial institution, insurance company has an element of customer service, whether it's on the phone, in person, over the web, via chat. So that's an important part for financial services. Another one is marketing data and websites. So these organizations have huge budgets for marketing. So it's a large area for business analysts to take part. Processes are really important. The larger the organization, the more processes you need. And the reason that is, you need to, when you have a large organization, make sure you have consistency. And the only way you can have consistency with a large number of employees is to make sure you have processes and procedures for people to follow. So process is a huge piece. There are also some evolutional steps that are happening right now in financial services. There's new competitors coming to the market, like Apple, Google. So there are evolutionary projects that are happening, transformational projects, if you will. And there's also a lot of reporting involved, a lot of compliance, making sure that regulations are being met. So reporting is a large part as well, and some of that might be related to BI, but there's always the need for business analysts to understand what is the need and how do you communicate that effectively to the BI professionals you might be working for. Delkas, I know you've also worked in financial services. What's your experience?
I did. So My career actually started in cruising. I worked for Norwegian Cruise Line, which I've always considered my corporate alma mater. Pretty much grew up there, started working right out of high school, and I worked there for over 10 years, close to 12, 13 years in cruising. So when I switched over from the cruise line industry to fintech, for me it was completely, it was it was a hard transition personally, because I went from cruising, like my day to day, my stakeholders talked about itineraries and what's the next cruise port that we're going to, how many people we could have on board. So the daily conversations were very different on my projects than when I moved over to fintech, and everything for me was black and white. It was all highly regulated. It was like the government usually told you what you could and couldn't do. So even the timelines on projects were different. So in fintech, for me, it was like you have a year to comply with this new regulation, or you have 6 months to comply with this regulation. Whereas in the cruising industry, it was more about the everyday, innovative, very fast-paced, changing market. So it was all about our stakeholders is the world. Where do they want to go? What do they want to see? And how are you going to be competitive with the other cruise lines? So anytime we were on a project, it was due yesterday. There was no time to just sit. Usually what ended up happening, executive management will come up with some awesome promotion and the system had to catch up. We didn't have how to control that promotion or how to make the changes, fast enough in the system. So it was very different from fintech. Everything is 1 + 1 is 2. And it's very black and white. Your stakeholders are they know exactly what they want and why they want it and how it needs to get done. In the cruise industry, you go on a cruise, 1 + 1 might come back pregnant as 3. Like you got to get creative. Nothing was black and white. It was all about innovation and quick turnaround. So for me, it was a shock factor moving from one to the other. We also had tons of integrations, which in fintech we had as well. We had to, the cruise platform had to integrate with the airlines, had to integrate with the hotels, and then even on board you have, point of service systems, which I think Jared, moving it over to yours as well. You were in retail, so you understand some of those point of sale systems, and you also had a big contrast in your history of your career.
So yeah, so working in retail and the oil and gas industry could not be any different. They were diametrically opposed. So retail was very data driven, very focused, and everything had to be very precise and very deliberate because those margins are so small. So I learned early on to do business cases. I was doing probably 2-3 business cases a month on various projects, some of which never saw the light of day, but we were doing business cases. Expenditures were scrutinized and everything had to be justified. So business analysis, and I keep talking about connecting those dots. It was just incredibly important to ensure that we were doing things that provided the most value. And that's how I thought everyone did things. This was business analysis. And then I go to the energy sector. The energy sector, money grows on trees. It's a lot less demanding. Money isn't a big issue at all, right? But it is one of the most regulated industries in the world. So we have to stay up to speed on those changing regulations, which seemingly changed on a dime as we implemented change. It was difficult to get into the swing of things because I was so used to having to justify everything I did, and suddenly that wasn't important. It was more important to continuously change based on, perhaps you might call it flavor of the day, right? I once was asked to change the system just because of conflicting egos. They didn't like the system because their predecessor had brought it in, and let's just throw $10 million and change the system. So completely different. Not to say that we didn't do a lot of great things in the energy sector. It was very rewarding, and I loved some of the projects. As I said, being in health and safety was one of the things. I'd like to think that we saved some lives. So from that perspective, it will be very near and dear to my heart for the rest of my life.
Thank you, Jared.
Sorry, go ahead, Mariah.
No, thank you, Jared. So I just displayed a poll over here with our results from our attendees here for what kind of industries they're in. So other tends to be more of those industries like healthcare and social services, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, aerospace, cybersecurity and defense, and energy and utilities. Looking at these results, what do our panelists have to say towards those?
Just looking at the results, I think that there's a lot of alignment to the survey. The financial services hit it right on the nail on the head, 26%. Fairly good reflection of what our survey had previously taken on. Other thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I was actually just trying to reach over to my cheat sheet notes here of what our survey said, like you mentioned. And that's pretty cool that it's exactly 26%.
Yeah, are you sure this was a poll and wasn't taken directly from the salary survey? Because it's very indicative of what the salary survey said. So, of course, the salary survey is going out. I think it's going out right now for 2020, and it's interesting to see how this breaks down.
I would say we might end up with the similar results, because we keep referring to the survey, but the numbers that are on your screen right now are last year's results. So as Jared mentioned, the survey that's going out this week, if it hasn't already gone out, I'm curious to see if there's a shift. But according to our poll, there's not going to be much of a shift.
That's awesome.
That's some really interesting insights. So to move on from this one, I've got some global trends up here. So I just wanted to share these from CNN. So business analysis in a broad sense is growing significantly in job demand. Role delineations of many professionals are less clear, and there are overlaps in capacity. So I'll direct this question at Scott. What are some trends you are seeing in the industry?
Sure. So looking at some of the BA trends that I'm personally seeing, there are increasing needs for compliance and reporting. And you look at the data loss prevention laws that are coming out, the privacy laws, we're all having to deal with these in some way. So that's one thing. Another is an increased volume in data. We're getting more and more data points in businesses, and that's driving the interest and demand for business intelligence. So as a BA, as I mentioned earlier, if you're able to understand what the needs are and be able to articulate those needs to the IT professionals you're working with, that's really important. Cybersecurity threats, I mean, this is all over the place, and it's driving new work. In my last workplace, there were a number of security projects that we were working through. And as a BA, I had staff that were working on each of those because you do need that business analyst to sit people down, understand what those needs are, peel back the layers of the onion and really get to root cause on things to understand how you can properly satisfy those needs. There are organizations shifting. You might see this in your current work or in a future workplace you're going to, but shifting from that on-site infrastructure to cloud, the whole industry is moving this way. It's really expensive now to operate hardware in your premises. So going to the cloud offers more solution, more redundancy, less overhead in terms of managing things. So those are some projects I've seen that have matured moving data centers. And then lastly, I threw this one on here around waterfall projects and Agile. And I remember a decade ago taking Agile training and everyone thinking, hey, this is the latest and greatest thing. In my experience, the shift is happening very slowly. It's happening because people are seeing the effectiveness of working in an Agile fashion. But in terms of the way organizations think about things and plan things out, I personally see that transition happening slowly and probably will for the next 5-10 years. But I am witnessing more and more projects working in Agile fashion and taking advantage of being able to respond quickly to new demands that are coming up.
Thank you, Scott.
What are your thoughts on the Agile piece? Do you guys see some of that happening as well?
So, do you want to go ahead, Jonathan?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. I think the shift from waterfall projects to Agile is happening at different speeds in different industries. Interesting that being in highly regulated industries, I find that it's slower than in some of the more creative industries, right? So it really depends. Had someone ask me about the difference between waterfall and agile, and really, and Scott, I know you're a woodworker, but one's a hammer and one's a wrench. In some cases, you're going to need a waterfall project. In some cases, you're going to need an agile project. It's not a one size fits all. It's best fit for the situation on hand.
And even to add to that, I've been on many projects throughout my career where the organization thinks it's waterfall, and we'll go through the whole requirements document and sign-offs and have a roadmap with milestones that are set out 3, 4, 6 months out, and then something comes up. So you end up going agile halfway through the project because something needs to get done, and without even knowing the terminology, without knowing the process, you end up having this quick 10-minute meeting in the morning where all right, what do we got to do today? And then everybody runs off, scatters, and just gets it done, having no clue that they're actually following agile. And that was my experience. I did agile for years without knowing I was doing it, just because of the cruise line scenario, that everything had to be done yesterday. It kind of just happened, and somewhere along the line, I actually took a course and went, oh, that's what that's called. So even though I think some companies try to define a process, this is what we're doing. It's always, for me, it's always been a hybrid. It's always just been a little bit of everything.
So those are some great insights into just where BA industry trends are moving. I'll direct my next question at Danelkis. We all know that it's a trying time and some of us are looking for work, but how do people transition into a new industry?
So this question is near and dear right now. I am currently based in Florida, and our unemployment rate is interesting, being that most of Florida is travel and tourism, or just guest services. So I've had quite a few people reach out to me, and I think that the biggest thing to keep in mind is that as BAs, we're change agents. We need to remind ourselves this is what we're good at. We're so ahead of everybody else right now, just because it's a natural state for us. So I know that the initial is to freak out and oh my God, I don't have a job. What am I going to do? Everyone's looking for a job. That's normal. But if we were to stop and just say, okay, I'm really good at solving everybody else's problem. We're usually bad about internalizing that. At least I know I am. But if I was to stop right now and say, okay, what are my needs? What value am I seeking? What's going to make a difference that I could transition? Treat your current situation like a project. So if you know that, okay, you need to pay your bills, you need to food on the table, what am I going to do to make that happen? And the little things that you do today that might not be, let's say, and one of the things for me is like, if you worked for a company that might have furloughed you, and that there's changes that could be done, you have all these great ideas, empower yourself and just go for it. Even if you're off the clock and not getting paid, put together your own requirements, put together what your own outlook is, and turn around and hand it over to someone. Empower yourself with your life being your project of saying, this is how I can make all of our situations better. And the other half of it is, for me anyway, being in a variety of industries through my career, is find something that you believe in and that you have passion. If you have passion in the industry that you're in, it's just going to come natural to you. You're going to love every minute. It's that cliche of find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I can finally say that is true. Like, it doesn't matter how many hours you put in if you're enjoying what you're doing. And then just elevating yourself, believing in yourself, and again, your life as a project. Innovate your own life and reach out to those, we're good at networking, we're good at creating relationships. Do it for yourself, create that relationship, prove yourself, and changes that could be done in an industry that you want to go into. And that person might turn around and go, we're going to offer you something. And if they don't, then it's probably not worth it. And don't give up on yourself. Just keep innovating who you are and what you believe in. And I think the key, which I personally struggle, is knowing that we're good at what we do. And the times that we're living in right now work in our favor. Because again, we embrace change on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I'll
That's
chime in
such-
there, John. I think one thing that I've encountered in terms of large corporations is you're dealing with a recruiter. And a recruiter typically has a checklist of these are the things you need to know. And if industry knowledge is one of those, as a BA, you stand on the other strengths that you have, and convince that recruiter or that person that's screening you that, hey, you know what, I've got all these things here. I don't have this one thing, but I'm bringing a full toolbox.
Right.
And I think, Jared, you had mentioned something previous about that, sort of standing up and justifying or advocating for your skill set.
So absolutely. So one of the really cool things, and you and I talked about this a number of times, is that if you're a new BA in a new industry, you actually bring an advantage because you're not going to come in with those assumptions that a seasoned BA is going to have. You're not going to say, well, this is how we've always done it, so this is the way why do we do this? Why do we do this? And from that perspective, the lack of domain knowledge will actually work in your favor because you're asking the questions that everyone else just assumes they already know the answers. And we all know that assumptions just cause havoc for us, right? That's a big thing for us.
That would definitely be in fintech. It was an industry that I was completely blind to. I mean, how do you go from cruising to finance? It just, but I asked one too many questions because I didn't know the industry, and I was successful because of it. So you're absolutely right. But it's, you know, we're good change agents. And again, I think we're ahead of everyone else.
This is a really important topic for a lot of people. That's true. I'll direct my next question at Jared. What can a prospective BA professional do to stand out as a candidate?
I think Danelka's hit this on the head. Show some passion, show some enthusiasm, some dedication, right? So Scott, when you were saying, you know, you don't know the industry, you don't know the company or whatnot, do some research. Say, you know what, I may not know this, but give me the chance. Let me learn. I got my break in the energy sector not because I was necessarily a technically gifted BA, but because I was enthusiastic and passionate about business analysis, right? So get involved in the community, invest in yourself. So director of chapters, I have to say this, join a local chapter, right? Joining the local chapter is probably the best thing I did for my career. Not only did I get to meet a lot of influential people, which I see some of them have joined us on the call today, but it's actually responsible for my current role. I got here because of my involvement in the chapter. I know a story. I don't know the young lady in our Hawaii chapter, which wanted to become a business analyst. She had no experience. She had never even read the BA box. She had really didn't know what to do. So she decided that that's what she wanted. So she read the BA box. She went and got her ECBA certification, and she went to those recruiters and said, listen, I don't have the experience, but I've got this piece of paper from my IIBA that says I know the tools and techniques, and I want to prove myself. Give me the chance. So she eventually got hired fairly quickly, from what I understand, because of her passion and her enthusiasm. And from what I understand, she's currently kicking butt and gaining that experience. I know of another BA that I met at a local chapter meeting that applied for a position in the oil and gas company that I happen to be working for, and he didn't get that position. But a few months later, when another position came up, the hiring manager thought of him because of that passion, that dedication that he'd shown. So show some passion, show some dedication, stand out for the crowd. And I know, Janelle, as you and I have talked about this a lot of times, that's one of the reasons why you got certified, was that you would stand out so you could differentiate yourself from your next candidate. And I think you need to invest in the career, whether that's IIBA membership, IIBA certification, domain knowledge, technical, whatever. I think we just need to keep learning and show that what we can do, because a business analysis, doing the proper analysis and the proper role is a powerful change agent. And I think Danelka, she hit it on the head here. It's our time to shine.
Absolutely. And Jared, I'm going to share like even a personal story. I mean, I'm living proof. Look where I work. I originally was I was a college dropout originally. And then, 15 years later, I finally went back to school. But I went throughout my career just taking risk, I think is a key word, of getting involved with projects, networking with the right people, and then volunteering to be involved with projects. I never thought I would be in technology ever. I have an older sister. She's a developer. She tried to get me into MIS back in the day for the longest, and my response was, I'm a people person. I'm not going to sit behind a computer. So I worked for a cruise line, and I started, entry level, and you just slowly, you meet the right people and you take those risks. I could probably say that most of the jobs I've ever had, I've known someone. And it's not because, oh, somebody got me in just because I'm nice. It's because throughout that, I've proven that I'm willing to just jump in and do whatever it takes to get the job done. And then in the process, I'll learn and get whatever certification I need to do it properly. So Jared and I actually met years ago when neither one of us worked for IIBA, and we were at our conference, at the BBC conference. And it was all about gaining all that knowledge and networking. So one day when I get an email of, hey, you might want to check out our posting, I'm going to admit my first reaction was, there is no way I will ever apply at IIBA. It was that I am not worthy. You need to be like the best BA ever to work for IIBA. And it took some convincing of, just read the job description. And then it took a lot, honestly, from my part to just jump in and take that risk. So not only which by the way, LinkedIn works miracles in staying in touch with people. It's taking that leap of faith, making those right relationships that other people might see in you what you don't see in yourself. And in this case, Jared saw that in me. Jared thought that I was worthy of working here, even though I still questioned myself. And it's jumping in and taking that risk because it comes natural to us for everyone else. Now it's time to apply it for ourselves.
And on that note, Janelle, we're happy to have hired you.
Yay, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
This is so important. Thank you to all of our panelists for this. We will now open the floor up for a Q&A to all of our panelists. I welcome attendees to send their questions using the questions tab in your control panel. We do have a few hundred people on the call, so I apologize, but we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So to start us off, I will open up the chat box.
A few hundred is an understatement.
I know. So first question is from an engineer with 11 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. So they're interested in starting a career in business analysis. What challenges do you think they can face in this transition?
Wow, that's a tough question, Mariah. Getting into the going from oil and gas to anything right now is probably a pretty smart move. I know Danelka was saying, how hard hit Florida is in the hospitality industry, but oil and gas is been kicked really badly as well. Again, I would first and foremost, I would read the BABOK, get understanding on the lingo and the tools and techniques and the processes involved in business analysis. Second of all, I would ensure that we have a sense of curiosity. Why? Why does this work? Why does this? Why should we be doing this? Why? Janelka's touched on one of the techniques, which is the 5 whys. Practice it on an hourly basis if you can. I remember being at a conference once that said that why is a dangerous question, and it is, because if you ask why the wrong way, it comes across differently than the reason that you're intending. Why are you doing your job this way is a very aggressive stance. So you want to just make sure that your soft skills are up to speed as well.
Let me understand why you do it that way.
Exactly. Help me understand, and that's what it is. And what did you say earlier, Danelka? Something about ask questions to learn to understand, not to learn to respond.
Listen to understand, not to respond.
And that's kind of what you have to do with questions as well.
Thank you, Jared. I'll look to Sandra for our next question. What do you wish someone had told you before you started a career in business analysis?
That's a loaded question.
I'll handle this one just from a personal experience. I started off my career as a software developer, worked at a large bank, spent 3 years, and I love my job. And when I'm happy, I whistle. And so I used to whistle everywhere. And one day, I stopped whistling, and I couldn't figure out why. So I went to the HR department, and this guy walked me through a Myers-Briggs test, and it turns out my personality type is really aligned well with business analysis. So I transitioned my career. So in saying that, it was sort of an understanding of who I am, what I enjoy doing, and sort of making that pivot, that transition. So yeah, I just sort of wanted to share that experience of getting to that point.
And I never did with the whistling.
Now we're gonna have to be more alert.
It's not good in the grocery store right now.
What was that?
Not good in a grocery store right now, whistling. People don't appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. There's a few questions around data analytics and business analysis. So I'll phrase it like Ashima here. Is it necessary for a business analyst to acquire data analytics skills? If not, is there some data analytics skills that would be useful for a BA?
Is it necessary? That's a loaded question. I don't know that it's necessary. I think you probably could do business analysis without data analytics, but I think Scott and Danelka's both mentioned that we're living in a very data-centric world. So I think you might be handicapped if you didn't have some data analytics skilled. Now, I grew up starting in the reporting group of a major Canadian retailer, so I learned data analysis and data mining very early, and I used that to discover trends and whatnot. I mentioned earlier, I think that data analysis helped save a life, and I will always be eternally proud that the analysis I did, if it brought one person home from work at the end of their shift, it was an absolute great day. So I think, is it necessary? Probably not technically, but I think you'd be handicapped without it.
It's definitely beneficial, and if you feel that that's not one of your strong suits, then reach out to someone that you know is good at it. And you could, like, Jared is amazing with creating spreadsheets and gathering data. I'm okay with it. I could kind of sort of do my little queries, but I know that if I get stuck and I need something, I have Jared on speed dial, and he's going to help me through it. So I think if you know that that's one of your weaknesses, then make it a point to reach out to someone that is a strength for them, and you learn from them without even noticing, or they help you along the way. Because you guys, we're not alone in this. Like, we're all about relationships and networking and building each other up. So use it to your advantage as well.
Yeah, I'll also suggest there's different levels of data analysis. There's some people that need to dig right into large pieces of data and data pools, data lakes, that type of thing. There's also putting together a business case. Putting together a business case is, I would say, lighter business analysis or data analysis, but you still need to ground your justification of things. So I would suggest at a bare minimum, you need to be able to do that type of work. But as Danelka suggested, find someone who's good at it, learn from them. One thing, I've managed a number of BAs, and one thing I find as a common theme is we all love to learn. And I think that's a strength for us as business analysts, is we can use that skill set to help us in our career.
That's very important. Mm-hmm.
Great points.
So another question was around resources for data analytics. Would you recommend any education or specific books, resources like that?
Well, as a member of IIBA, you have complete access to our online library.
I knew you were going to do that.
With over 11,000 titles. So the online library is a great resource for you, first and foremost, for anything. As I said, we recently went from 250 to over 11,000 titles. Exponential increase is a probably not even appropriate here. So there's loads of opportunities there. We will be releasing the I'm going to get the words wrong. It's the Guide to Business Data Analytics within the next week or two. So that's another awesome opportunity for you. Janelka, Scott, did I miss anything?
No, that online library, I'll just say, I just bought 2 BA books and looked them up in that resource that we have, and they're both there. So I didn't need to buy them. So yeah, very rich.
I'll move on to a question from Harris. Since the BA field seems broad with different kinds of content, do BAs specialize in certain areas or deliverables in the workplace? It seems like job descriptions aren't always clear.
Yeah, I'll take that one on point. I've managed a number of BA teams, and what I found in my team is the way my management style is I like to understand what people's interests are and have them focus on that, because let's face it, if you're working on something you're interested in, it's going to be more engaging, you're going to be better at it. So in my last team, for example, there was someone that was interested in security. So he was my BA for going through the security projects. Someone else was interested in BI work, so I had that person working on BI. So there are different areas that you can focus in on. You don't have to be a master of all trades, but I'm not sure whether there are specific types of BAs.
Well, so in the last organization I was with, we had project BAs, we had operational BAs, and we had strategic BAs. So each of those 3 roles, if you will, were doing different types of business analysis, right? They were still all defining the needs, recommending solutions to provide value, but at different levels. So a operational BA would probably not be doing business cases or whatnot, right? I know that as a strategic BA, I wasn't doing requirement specifications or use cases or user stories. So different aspects of different roles are going to see you do different things. We used to talk about a T-shaped individual because you would be very skilled in one particular segment. So you might be a business intelligence expert, for lack of better terminology, or you might be a financial expert or whatnot. So you get a broad knowledge area on most things. I mean, when I first started as a BA, it was jack of all trades, master of none. But I think that's kind of progressed. So you're still a jack of all trades, but you're a master of many. So you do have your specialities that you wouldn't normally. There are still generalist BAs, but I think more and more the industries that I've seen, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm only seeing a portion, but the industries that I've seen are going more towards a specialist BA. I need a BA that does these types of activities in this particular area.
You bring up a great point, because it goes also back to knowing who you are as a person. I've had a little bit of different types of BA roles throughout my career, and I think at the end of the day, we're successful. We'll put in the hours and we'll figure it out in one way or another, whether we team up with someone or we just figure it out. We're successful at the end. But I could tell you that there's some roles that I've enjoyed more, and when I enjoy the role, it just elevates my work to the next level. So for instance, I like to look at the big picture. So I was much better BA when I was an enterprise BA than when I was a technical BA. I could get the job done as a technical BA, but that's not where my passion is. So it was very different. Just the level of output that I would give was very different. And it goes just back to knowing your own skills and your strengths and where you really want to be. If technical BA was my route, if that's where I wanted to end up, then take more courses or surround yourself with those people so that you can learn from them. But it was short-lived, because I quickly learned that I didn't enjoy it as much as enterprise roles.
Thanks, Danelkis. We actually have another question that kind of leads into the idea of courses and how you can educate yourself. Parmita asks about how does IIBA certification help me in becoming a BA? I know we have 3 CBOP certified people on the call. I
learned tons by reading the BABOK. I I don't know if I should publicly share this, but I am, because I'm just transparent and an open book. As we mentioned earlier, at one point in my career, I needed that extra edge to set myself aside from all the other BAs that were running up against other, for roles. So I started Googling. I didn't know about IIBA back then, and I started doing a search online and for BA certification, and that's how I learned about IIBA. And in my weird head, even though I do not have a big ego at all whatsoever, but I was like, I've been a BA for 15 years. I got this. I'm going to go take the test. And I did not pass my CBAP. Because you do need to read the BABOK. There's just terms that from an everyday life that I had, I didn't know what certain procedures were, techniques were called. I didn't know they had an official name. Once I got my CBAP, first of all, it's a huge ego booster. It really does help. And then it gives you that, aside from confidence, when you're in a public environment, you could actually, I don't know, like you could speak with others at a much more confident level and know the terminology behind it, where things that it really was an ego booster for me, because things that I just thought I just did organically is really a technique. And there's not everyone, like sometimes we joke, common sense. Not everybody has common sense. It's not that common. The 5 whys technique, I think since I was born, I used to drive my parents up the wall asking questions, but it doesn't come natural to everyone. And then when you actually take a certification or a course behind it, you learn the reasonings why you're doing certain things. You don't just ask why just because. Like there's reasons for it. And then you have that common audience of other CBAPs that are out there that, you could go from corporation to corporation, and I mean, you could spot them when you work with them who's actually, gone through it and elevated it, their commitment to our industry. I know that when I was hiring, to me, that just showed, commitment goes a long way. And if you're committed to yourself and to your career, I'm going to hire you over somebody else that just has the experience.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Anantha.
from my experience studying for the CBAP, I actually learned a number of things I had not been exposed to. I had almost a decade of experience as a BA, and I thought, yeah, I've got this. But after I started studying it, I realized I hadn't been exposed to requirements traceability. That was new for me. And I happened to be on a project at the time leading as the lead BA with 5 other BAs. Traceability was huge. So it wasn't, for me, the reason I pursued it was so I could have that stamp of approval externally to say, Scott knows his stuff. But the learning process I went through, I was surprised at. And I'm actually a better BA because of it.
So it's interesting. I talked to a number of BAs that are CBAP certified, and I think you hit on the head. Scott knows his stuff, but Scott doesn't know everything, right? Being a CBAP doesn't mean that you are an expert BA. It means you know your stuff and you know the tools and techniques. Was in a conference last year. Remember when we could travel? Well, those were good times. Conference last year, and we were talking about the tools and techniques in the BABOK. There's 50 some odd tools and techniques. How many of those tools and techniques do you use? 4, maybe 5, right? You've got your tried and true. They've always worked. But that doesn't mean you're an expert on the other 46, right? So,
or that you know them by name.
or you know them by name, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
But no, being a CBAP certified practitioner has helped me enormously, right? It's given me some weight behind what I say, and when I say something to stakeholders. So I was working at oil and gas and dealing with VPs and whatnot, and having that certification, I just had a little bit more edge. They took me a little bit more professionally, and they took my word more often because I had some certification behind my name. Right.
Thanks, Jared. So I will move on to the next question, more around, so someone is interested in moving from being in banking into being a BA. So what do you have for advice for anybody moving from that sector to this one?
I guess I'll take that one. So being a banking person that understands the operations, how things work, understand the customer, are part of what a BA needs. So I sort of think of it in three different areas. One is knowledge of the business, one is your hard skills, and one is your soft skills. So knowledge of the business sounds like this person probably has the expertise. Soft skills are how we communicate. Those things come easily to some people. Other people have to work more at them. The hard skills, I think, are where you would need to focus. So what are the tools and techniques that BAs use? That would be my suggestion, is focusing your energy on that. And then meeting the people that are doing these type of jobs in your organization. Typically, banks are large, so there's a lot of people. Start your networking. Talk to people that are doing these type of things. If you've heard about a project, find out who the BA was. Really start to network within your organization, because that transition will be easier within an organization because you have a reputation than it would be going out to the street and trying to convince someone to hire you.
So Scott, I'm going to build on that. I think finding a mentor is probably a really good avenue for you, right? Finding someone that can take you out under their wing and show you the ropes. I know that there was a advertisement on TV probably 4 or 5 years ago for a Canadian bank that said, if you want to start paying less banking fees, then start paying less banking fees. Kind of a glib answer, but a mentor of mine said, if you want to get into strategic business analyst, start thinking strategically, start doing it. Show your worth, show that you can do the role, do the job or whatnot, because people aren't out there going, I wonder who could be a BA, but they will notice if you're doing business analysis. They'll say, oh, look, Mary is doing some great analysis. Maybe we should, and maybe she does the analysis and she proves to you that, that you should invest in whatever project or whatever the analysis that she's doing. And maybe she proves to the organization that, she should be a BA. We want her on our team. It's a powerful, powerful thing.
And you guys, it starts small. It's when we talk about finding a mentor or reaching out to other people that are already doing it, it doesn't need to be intimidating and in a meeting and like at the office. And I know things are a little different now, but I've really relied a lot upon social media and like LinkedIn and just doing searches. Find someone. I like the suggestion that you had of, start within your own organization, because that's where you are and that's what you know, and have coffee with someone. Or, if you know that they have kids that are out at a ball game, go and sit on the bleachers with that person and watch the kids, play ball together. You're going to eventually just start a conversation. You're going to eventually build a relationship with them. You create that whole stakeholder relationship, even if you're not in the role right now. It's let them know who you are and what your beliefs are. Let them know what your interests are. Pick their brain. Let them pick your brain. And it might not happen overnight, but it's one of those things that if you offer suggestions and your insight, then someday they'll be like, hey, we need this person on our team, or this person will be a great fit for XYZ, and they'll bring you in. So don't think of it as something intimidating, but just the small steps that add up, make a difference.
Yeah, and I'll just offer a little bit of encouragement too. The last team that I managed, half of my BAs were in professional disciplines before becoming a BA. 2 of them were certified accountants before they became BAs. They sort of fell into a role that they were really good at, and it turns out over time that matured into business analysis. So just because you're not doing the job right now in a formal title, doesn't mean you can't get there.
As I said earlier, we all do business analysis.
Do you have any particular recommendations around mentorship? Esli is asking, how can I get professional BA to be my mentor through the IIBA path?
Join your local chapter.
I already said, so I wasn't going to repeat it, but no, that's a great opportunity.
I'm sorry. I know it sounds cliche coming from Jared and I, but this is where we actually started before we came on board. So we speak truth from the heart, not just because of our current positions. Like we mentioned, this is how we got here. And if your local chapters usually have, first of all, the passion is absolutely there. And some chapters actually have a formal mentoring program. Others do it informally. But I think for the most part, just the personality of a BA. I mean, our overarching goal is to find better outcomes, and we do it among ourselves. We do it with our peers as well. So reaching out, again, locally, or whether it's your chapter, whether it's the organization you work for, or the organization you strive to work for, create those relationships. And even though, again, it's unofficial, you end up learning a lot from those that are already in the industry, because we love to share, we love to grow others.
So that really leads into another question around personality. So we have a question where they're asking, Scott mentioned that your personality type matches with a BA. What specific personality traits do you find are consistent in BAs?
Be crazy.
So what I mentioned earlier was learning, being a curious person, being a learner. Another one is being a strong communicator. Well, I guess that isn't really personality related. I myself am an introvert who has learned to live in an extroverted world. I facilitate very large meetings. So that's one personality trait I wouldn't let you hold you back if you are an introvert. I've met a number of VAs that are. So I think for me, personality learning is one of those. Jared, you were going to say something?
So it's interesting. I've met a lot of BAs through IIBA, and most BAs tend to be introverted. They tend to be introverted until they are comfortable in their knowledge in the area. So you get a group of BAs together at a conference. Oh my gosh, they're, as one PM said, you BAs, you're all a rowdy bunch. We are. I mean, we start talking about agile methodologies or use cases, or how to get value, or how to do a more compelling business case, and we start to liven up. But back in the real world, no, we want to just do our analysis, and we want to just stay in where we are, because that's our comfort zone. We tend to stay in the comfort zone because most BAs are introverted. We come up with options, alternatives on how we can live in an extroverted world, but for the most part, we're all introverts, including myself, believe it or not.
Thanks, Jared. I have quite a few comments from HR professionals that are interested in moving into the BA profession. Now, I see that we're close on the clock right now, so I think this will have to be the last question. So what are your recommendations on moving from an HR role into something more BA?
Who wants to take this one?
I had a BA on my team who worked in the HRIS area. If you're transitioning, again, pivot from what you know. So as an HR professional, you know things about payroll and benefits and administration, that type of thing. Pivot into the HRIS area, so the information systems related. So look at the various systems that you use and seek out opportunities in that area. You might be working with some technology people today. Start the conversation with them. Understand what it is they're working on and how a BA could help. But I think back to Jared's point, I think it was Jared, having a mentor is a really good way to transition that. I hope that's helpful.
I think it also depends on so even if you're in HR, it's to what degree, because if you're techie, maybe you want to go into working for one of the larger, like the ultimate softwares or the Workdays, where the software is HR software. So you could apply your day-to-day domain knowledge into the technology. So if you're more of a techie person, that might be an avenue, because you're ahead of the game there, knowing it firsthand. And then if you still want to keep on the people skills side of it, because most HR is about the people, I think your next level is finding out what's your next passion and finding an industry that you're passionate in. So you've been doing HR, but in what sector? And if that's a sector that you want to stay in, then taking it from that angle and just knowing what your strengths are, whether it's techie or not.
Thanks, Danilka. Sorry, did I cut you off, Jared?
Yeah, I'm just going to one more thing. So Scott, I think the mentor thing, it doesn't matter whether you're in HR ask whether you're in financial, whatnot. I think having that mentor is key. And my one mentor, I obviously think the world of him. He used to say that obstacles were meant to be stepped over and not to be hidden behind. So if there's an obstacle in your way, what's it going to take for you to get past that obstacle? What do you need to do? And you can keep asking yourself, I'm not letting this roadblock prevent me from success. You're in control. Do what you need, ask what you need, get the help that you need, and overcome that obstacle. Go for it.
Thanks, Jared. And thank you to you too, Danelkis and Scott. I think this has been a really worthwhile discussion, and we've learned a lot just about understanding business analysis. And thank you to all of our attendees for being here. So we will send a follow-up email to you. Please feel free to respond with any questions or comments you may have. And thanks for joining us today. And we are always looking for new webinar ideas, so just feel free to send them to us. Thank you for your time, and I'll sign off with that.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.